You're listening to the PR Wind Down Podcast, the show for public relations professionals who are ready to see real change in the PR industry. We are your hosts, April White and Laura Schooler. Let's get ready to wind down. Laura, how have you been?
We have not done a podcast for a long time, so.
Are you feeling rusty?
Yes.
Am I making you nervous? Oh my God, I'm making you lose your voice.
So I thought I'd wear my jean jacket from high school.
How does that make you feel more podcast ready?
It makes me feel like a Led Zeppelin fan.
Oh.
It doesn't make me more podcast ready. It makes me cool.
It makes you feel ready to rock.
Ready to rock. Exactly.
That's really funny. Well, you look great. You look fully ready to rock.
Well, let's rock PR as much as PR can be rocked.
Well, I guess we'll have to find out what that means. All right, I'm going to let him Peter. Hey, Peter.
Go Yankees! Did you put the Yankee hat behind you on purpose, or is that always there?
That's always there.
Oh my God. I love this guy. It's my favorite guest
I was just going to
already.
say, if he planted that as the key to Laura's heart, then he's a bigger fan than I realized.
Here's my
Laura,
little Wi-Fi speaker that's usually...
Oh, there you go.
Laura is a huge Yankees fan, so that's why I thought, oh my goodness, did you do your homework so excessively that you figured that out and then planted this, thing to light her up?
Yeah, up there is the hat, the book, the facade of Old Yankee Stadium.
It's amazing. Oh. So you guys are like cut of the same cloth here.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to quickly introduce Peter and then we'll jump right in. So Peter is the author of The Captivating Public Speaker and also the CEO of Peter George Public Speaking Training. And today we are going to discuss the top 3 tips to help PR practitioners train and become better public speakers. So I'm very excited to have Peter here today. Thank you for joining us. And we're excited to dive into some of these tips and tricks. I know we have a lot of clients also that are not naturally great public speakers when it comes to either the speaking engagements you land them and or the interviews. And I know also PR people tend to be in PR because they want to put somebody else in the front and center. And then suddenly when you're cast in the spotlight, it's like, no.
I have a lot to say about this subject. So this is exciting.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, Laura, do you want to jump in with all the things you have to say and then ask Peter questions? Or I feel like you're like burgeoning with
I know. Well, no, I mean, there's just the whole notion of public speaking is something that I was supposed to just know how to do because my father is all about public speaking. He'll go run and, give a speech at the end of the block if somebody asked him to, but it's not so easy for most people. And I thought I was supposed to just be able to do it very easily, through, I don't know, DNA or something. And then I found that I was not particularly good at it. And I was very nervous about it. So when somebody asks me in a job interview or whatever, what is the weakness? How you always get asked that question. I will say it's public speaking, but that I have done a number of things to improve upon that.
That's so funny, though, because you actually have done stand-up comedy. How can you?
Well, that was one of the things I did to improve upon it.
Oh.
I mean, I literally faced the fear. We can talk more about it as we get Peter.
As we get Peter talking. I know we've talked over the guest so far. Completely.
I know, the poor guy. So tell us why this is so important to you, or why it's so important in general, especially in our industry.
You don't have to look any further than Warren Buffett. And he's done okay for himself. And he says if you want to be 50% more valuable to yourself, your career, and your company, become a better public speaker. He's our generation's top investor. When he makes an investment, people scrutinize it, analyze it, millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars might move, depending on what he says. Yet he has said time and again, the greatest investment he ever made in his life was his public speaking course. So don't take it from me. Don't take it from anybody else. Just take it from Warren Buffett because he's still striving to do well, but I'm sure he'll get there.
Well, I'm a big fan. I'm a really big fan. In fact, I just recently did a presentation on trust, and one of the things that I quoted is his transparency level in his annual reports is just off the charts, and it's amazing because he'll come out and say things like, on the balance, my actions last year cost you money. I could have done this better. Like he just comes out in his reports and says, I could have done this better. And not, from a place of shame or anything, but just, yeah, I'm going to do this better next time. I didn't do what I set out to do.
Speaking of his style and his desire to communicate with people,
Mm,
it's very laid back. And people say, well, that's because he's from
Nebraska.
Omaha.
Yeah.
No, it's
Or
not. He
Nebraska.
understands that you communicate with people with simple language. It's very matter of fact language. And that's what most of us should be using when we're communicating with others, at least through the spoken word.
For sure. So, Peter, what are the top 3 tips to help train PR practitioners for themselves and also their clients?
As PR experts, you already know them. First one, who are you speaking to?
Your
A lot of us,
audience.
when we're asked to speak, it's so funny. We hear the word presentation, and this image goes off in our head of what a presentation should look like. And we run to PowerPoint or see what other slides we might have in our computer, which means I'm going to speak to a crowd of people, whether that's crowd is 3, 10, 100, 1,000, whatever it might be, based on what's in my computer, and say what I want to say, as opposed to what they want to hear, what they need to hear. So we make it about us, and it's all about the audience. You have to know who you're speaking to. There's an old adage in speaking, if you don't know anything about your audience, it's kind of like writing a love letter and titling it To Whom It May Concern. What are the odds that that's going to resonate with the person who receives the letter? Same thing with your audience. You've got to know who they are, and especially what they're looking for out of this particular talk. So it's not a presentation, it's a conversation.
Yeah, I've had that experience before when I've been asked to speak, even recently. And at first it was like, oh, cool, hypothetical room of hypothetical people. And it's not till you start digging into what you're actually going to say that you go, wait a second. How many people are going to be there? What are they looking to hear? What are the executives who hired me to speak to them looking for them to hear from? What are we trying to subtly convey that they need to hear? So it's like, trying to find that two-way street of what do they want to hear and need to hear versus what are you trying to communicate on behalf of yourself or whoever hired you, right, as a speaker.
Totally two different things of what I want to say and what
Yeah,
they need to hear.
for
Wouldn't it
sure.
be cool if they were the same thing all the time?
It would be amazing.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Make
Almost
us
never. That's why we have conversations.
exactly. And I believe a presentation is actually a dialogue. I believe it is a conversation, as opposed to getting up there and just vomiting information on people.
Right.
For
I've
sure.
only been on this earth 64 years, but I've learned people don't like to be vomited on.
All right. So what's tip number 2?
Tip number 2 is don't inform. Here we go again, right? Presentation. Here's what I'm going to tell them. Here's more of what I'm going to tell them. And I'm going to tell them again. So let me ask, have either one of you gone into a meeting, let's say 60-minute meeting, and you came out thinking, I will never, ever, ever get that hour back in my life? We've all
Yes.
been there,
Oh, yeah.
right? And here's why we feel that way. If the person who's facilitating the meeting and doing most of the speaking is just informing, do us all a favor, including the speaker, make a PDF and send it through email.
Right.
So don't
Yep.
speak to inform, speak to transform. How are the people you're speaking to going to be different when they leave that room? If
Mhm.
they leave the room very much the same as when they came in, that's when they say, I'll never get this time back. This was a waste of time.
Right.
And that's why so many of us, when we hear we're going to be in a meeting, our eyes roll back in our heads.
Yeah.
So, and we'd much rather pick up the phone and finally call for that root canal. Much more pleasant a time. So don't speak to inform, speak to transform.
Yep.
Right. Has to actually resonate and have that impact. So tip 3.
Rehearse, rehearse,
Mhm.
rehearse, rehearse. And people go, well, I'll be over rehearsed. If you think you're over rehearsed, keep rehearsing. So that's just an excuse to stop trying.
Right.
Yeah.
Rehearse. And here's why. I have conversations every so often, and people will say, you know what, I wing it and I do a great job. And that might be true. Also, there are 3-year-olds who can play Mozart without ever taking a piano lesson.
Right.
Maybe 5 of them on the face of the earth. Maybe
Yeah.
there's 5 speakers who can wing it. Maybe there's more. How many times do you send first drafts?
Oh, to a client, like of a release or a memo or whatever? Yeah, never,
Yeah.
right. And like 4 people look at it and then you look at it again. Yeah.
Right? You would never send a first draft.
No.
Mhm.
When we wing it, we're handing in our first draft
Yeah.
of a talk. We don't do that anywhere else in our lives, where it matters anyway. We just don't. We don't do a first draft of our taxes and hand them in. So why do we think it's okay to disrespect
Mhm.
our audience, our listeners, by handing in our first draft or rehearsing on their dime or time?
You're right. When you're right, you're right.
Yep. I'm going to record
Um,
this and show that to my wife.
April does a
Yeah.
lot of major
sorry.
speaking. April, how much do you rehearse?
So it depends on how much you count as the actual delivery and how much you count as compiling all of what I want to say and then putting it into slides and then you know what I mean? It's like it's kind of both, right? I think the preparation part of it can be both in the compiling the data that you're going to share, the graphics and all the things that are going to make the presentation compelling, plus knowing what you're going to say when you get up there. So it's usually a combination of both. When I did my TEDx talk, oh my God. The funny thing was I rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed drafts that I ended up scrapping, and then
Mhm.
rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed new drafts that replace those drafts, and then rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and memorized the draft that I edited after that. And then it was like almost infuriating at a point because you've rehearsed versions of a speech that you're no longer giving, but still in the doing of that, you're refining and getting more comfortable and getting clear on what it is that you want to say, right? So each
Mhm.
iteration or draft gets stronger. So for me, the longer the presentation, the less time allows for, an excessive amount of rehearsing. But if you're giving a 12-minute TEDx talk, then the rehearsal, it's kind of funny, like the amount of rehearsal goes up exponentially because you now have such a limited amount of time that you have to have something perfect. And even when I did storytelling classes, it's like, okay, it's a 4 or 5 minute story or 8-minute story or 10-minute story, whatever. If you're going to do that, you have to have it like dialed because you got to pack a punch in a very short amount of time versus if it's like a 2-hour presentation where it's a little bit tends to be more conversational. You're
Mhm.
asking the audience questions and there's less rehearsing you can actually do in that context. So it's funny, but ironically, the shorter your presentation, the more you need to rehearse.
Well, as the writing saying goes, and this has been attributed to so many people, including, I think it was Calvin Coolidge or Woodrow Wilson, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter.
Right.
Yes, 100%.
Because you have
Exactly.
to
And
cull it out. Well, with
same,
PR,
Mhm.
right?
same
You
in
have to cull
speech.
stuff out and still get your
It's
point
really
across.
interesting. Every time I read over memos and such that junior staff write, I usually go through to see how many words I can cut from what they wrote because they always use 6 words when 1 would suffice. I think it's largely because of the social media, the way that people write now, that they just write as they think instead of to communicate to a senior executive at a client. And they don't even think about that there's a difference. I know that's not the same as public speaking, but it is the same in terms of trying to get something as concise and packing a punch as much as possible. It takes a lot more time than writing something long and just, spewing and sending it out, right? So, how do you think that being an effective public speaker can change your life? And I don't necessarily mean your job, although you could talk about that if you want, but I even want to go beyond that.
Confidence.
Yeah.
Simple as that. It's confidence. And a lot of people say, well, I'm quite accomplished. Not me, but themselves. I'm quite accomplished and I have all the confidence I need. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with senior executives, including the president of a global corporation, who hired me to help him with his public speaking because he was moving up to CEO and wanted to just hone his skills.
Mhm.
And he said when we were done, I hired you to help me with public speaking, and you did a great deal. What I never thought would happen is the level of confidence I've achieved by us working together.
Mhm.
Oh, I love that.
So that happens so much. I can't think of a client that I've ever worked with where at one point I didn't see a light bulb go off over their head when a confidence just started to glow on them. You can see it happen. And that's a pretty cool thing. And that permeates various aspects of their lives,
Mhm.
many in work, but even outside of work. And that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah,
I love
that's great. And
I mean,
that's
how can you
why
beat that? That's so cool.
I've talked about it a little bit before, but I took comedy classes, stand-up comedy, and also what's the word
improv.
I'm looking improv, right. 100 times harder for me was doing stand-up because you had to hone it down and say it and remember it and say it in front of an audience and say it and fix it and change it and take feedback and change it and say it and rehearse it. And every week you'd be doing it. And then you had to go out into like, the comedy clubs of New York City and just say your stuff in front of a room full of usually like 18 hungover 23-year-old white guys. And it was, I mean, that's usually what it was. And they're
No, I
like,
know.
just all like, like trying to, and
Drunk
they all
college
thought they were
kids.
going to be Adam Sandler or something. And then I would get up and they were like, oh, geez, it was
So
the most
funny.
terrifying thing ever. But it helped me when I then, a couple of years later, ended up doing some live TV in front of Yankee Stadium on New York One, talking about the Yankee season or when they were going to the playoffs. I totally pulled from that. And it made me 100 times better than I would have otherwise had been at throwing yourself in the deep end of the pool, doing the scariest thing ever, and coming out on the other side. You come so far from where you started, so quickly. And then you can use it in so many different ways at work, in your life, wherever.
Oh, yeah. Comedy's all about timing.
Yeah.
Your timing from stand up just helps so much in public speaking because public speaking is about timing, engaging the human mind from
Hmm.
one mind to the other, one brain to the other. A lot of it has to do with timing. A lot of it has to do with asking questions. There are certain things that you do as a public speaker that makes the listener's brain fire and sync with yours. When
Hmm.
that's happening, that's when people leave saying, man, I don't know about those other 499 people, what they were thinking. They must be
Hmm.
disappointed because she was speaking only to me.
To me,
That's a pretty powerful thing.
It's amazing. I love that Laura just brought it full circle with Yankees.
I know that we've gone over time, so do we need to ask him our
Our final
yeah.
famous question. So, Peter, where can people find you and anything else that you want to plug on your way out the door here?
They can find how I help people one-on-one, groups, my book, any of that at petergeorgepublicspeaking.com.
Perfect. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. We appreciate the tips and hope that it's been helpful to everyone listening, that they can become better public speakers and also help their clients become better public speakers. We
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much, ladies. And Laura, you have very good taste.
Go Yankees.
No offense, April.
It's all right. I'm not against Yankees.
She just doesn't care.
I don't care.
Take care.
All right, you too, guys. Bye. So, Laura, do you want to jump into the horror story?
Ooh.
Oh,
Oh, it's a long one.
why don't you read it?
All right. I'll practice my public speaking.
I love it.
Okay. April.
Mm.
Laura.
Oh,
Help.
oh,
I hope this gets read on the podcast. I feel like you guys are my personal tiny managers that live in my phone every time I listen to this show.
no.
Here's the problem. I'm a mid-level person at the agency I work at. I've been here almost a year, and I am an AE. Interns and ACs are below me in the hierarchy. And of course, SAEs, AMs, ADs, and so on above me. I was assigned a manager to report to directly for mentorship across all of my accounts, problems, and goals. And I was pretty excited about that because my last agency had virtually no mentorship program at all. My manager is the AM for a bunch of important cybersecurity clients. I work on a variety of account types. And this manager does not like me. When I mess something up, she totally reams me. None of this is usable. You wasted valuable hours by doing this wrong. Or my personal favorite, what am I supposed to do with this?
Oh.
I don't mean for it to sound like I mess up often, but there have been a few instances of me drafting something and her not liking the angle or approach, like pitches or award entries. I usually ask her for specifics on how to improve, but she just makes tracked changes and then brushes me off if I have questions. I feel like our one-on-one meetings seem like a waste of her time, and it's embarrassing. So last week or so, my manager was on vacation, and while she was out, I had some deadlines. So another manager from the health tech practice stepped in to review my work while my usual manager was out. It was the best experience. I learned so much from her. She really took time to explain how I could improve things or be more effective. And I was excited to learn for the first time in a while at this job. She was so encouraging and patient, and I even landed a really tricky byline op with her help. My regular manager is coming back, and I feel bad for saying it because she's really knowledgeable, but I wish I could stay with this other manager. I am dreading going back. Is it wrong for me to continue going to this other manager for help sometimes when I need it? I don't want to cause a problem, but I need help figuring out who to get close to at this job if I want to actually advance my career in the long term. Thanks so much for reading all of that. Hot Potato AE.
That's a lot.
Now, being on the other side of this, I understand when you're younger, and the fact that they're giving you a mentor to begin with is phenomenal. A big step. Things that didn't exist or occur in nature back in the day, or probably not much now, is don't feel bad about this. And in fact, you should ask the powers that be if you can switch to this other person, because it sounds to me like A, it's not helping you, and B, the manager who's, quote, mean to you probably doesn't want to do it because she just doesn't sound like she's into teaching. So she'll probably be relieved to not have to do it anymore. And the other person sounds like they're, really into being like a teacher and a mentor and maybe very happy about it. So why don't we make everybody happy?
I like that. I think everyone has a different management style, and different management styles work for different kinds of people. I think some people's management styles are more naturally translatable across multiple people. For example, I think our COO, Lana Marshall, is a very good manager and is very good with a wide variety of people. I think I am not naturally as good of a manager, and I don't think I've had the same training she's gotten, even though I'm much older than her. But I think it works for people that are naturally like me and self-starters and creative and able to kind of run a long way with sort of a short burst of inspiration, right? Versus
forge their own path.
Yeah, for other people that are similar spirits, I think that works well. But I don't think it would work well for somebody that does want that direct feedback. I will say I've had, at the beginning of the story, I had a flashback to once when a manager simply wrote on a memo I had done, "horrible" in all caps, and then drew a dripping Halloween hand down it. And I was like
a bloody hand or something?
A bloody Halloween hand, horrible, claws, bloody claws down. It was actually quite graphic artistic, and well done. Yeah, it was actually a very,
scratching the skin of the paper that making it bleed. Nice. Yeah. Wow. Was it? I can't imagine something you wrote was horrible, but okay.
It wasn't, and I knew it wasn't. But the funny thing is, I thought, wow, how much time went into that beautiful, horrific drawing, that could have been spent trying to give me feedback on what was wrong. And then there was nothing specific marked. And I think that that is the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
As a junior person or a manager, if you just say, this is not good, but you don't give any feedback, that's like the worst possible way to train someone. There is something to be said for the slightly hands-off approach that the other manager's showing, in that it's going to prompt the junior person to be more naturally self-starter in terms of their like creative problem solving and their like, I think you can develop a crutch on your manager if they're a little bit too much, and it can almost in a way make you feel like maybe you aren't capable of the same thought process because you just get used to using them, and it feels like I'm never going to be that good.
Right. And I don't know if it's generational, like I was talking before. I feel like sometimes I don't do it that much, but sometimes I'll redline a memo,
Yeah.
like with track changes.
Yeah.
And I do it sometimes. I feel like usually when you do that, it's not a good look. I think it makes the person who receives that, like, it's like red pen kind of thing. It's not inspiring, and I don't think it really teaches anybody, even though it could. I don't think anybody takes it that way, and so I don't think anybody actually learns when you do that redlining thing. But something else that might be a little what? Do you do that?
Said, oops, sometimes.
I mean, I do it sometimes too.
Sake, like to just edit things or whatever, right?
I mean, a lot of times I just edit stuff and I don't even redline it. So like in theory, nobody really knows what I changed. But I have found, because I've been doing a lot of editing of things for the past several months, that like I find a lot of there's a few words, and maybe it's generational. A few words have slipped into the lexicon. And I changed that word. So I'll tell you what word it is. Surrounding. Every time I read something, anybody who's like 25 or younger, they say, I can't even put it into context. You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I think I can think of an example. It'd be like, we're going to promote the thought leadership surrounding the executives' insights into something like that, right?
Right. Instead of just saying regarding or about or on, they use the word surrounding all the time.
Yeah.
In everything that's written. And it's not just one person, it's everybody who's like 25 or younger.
I think that's also a big firm thing. That's been going on forever.
Surrounding.
Yeah, it's been
I 100% of the time delete it and change it, and nobody has ever noticed because they keep doing it.
It's because I think that they think it sounds more highfalutin and fancy.
But it's the wrong word. It's not the right word.
I know.
Surrounding the event, surrounding the article, surrounding the pitch, surrounding the report. It's not surrounding it. Surrounding it is literally a physical thing that like encompasses around something. This is slang effectively. And why are you using such a long word, surrounding, when you could say on, about? And so my point in saying this is that when I
really went down a rabbit hole here. I love it.
When I make these edits, either a red line or not, nobody cares, nobody reads it, nobody. And if I say it to them, or even spell check, guys spell check, nobody spell checks. So it partially, I think it's because they're young and they're busy, and because they've got a ton of stuff to do, and they just want to get it done. And they know that somebody's going to catch these mistakes. And I used to be guilty of that too. Somebody else will fix it. Somebody else will fix it. I got it. I got too much to do. I can't.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we're actually answering. Well, I answered this person.
Okay, we didn't actually. I didn't answer the question. I think it would depend on the politics of the situation. I don't think it hurts to, if the new mentor is willing to, have the side conversations and things. I don't see that that's an issue. If the other person is the manager, then there's a few ways to go about it. I think you could potentially ask for a new manager and just see, hey, I think I jive better with this manager and his or her style. Is it possible to switch to have this person be my mentor? You could potentially just tell the person that came back, hey, I really enjoy working with you. I think you have a lot to offer. You're obviously an incredible senior person. I'm wondering if there are ways that I can develop a better rapport with our feedback so that I learn more from you They have to phrase it very delicately, and I can't remember all the ins and outs of the beginning of the letter, but like, is there a way for you to give me feedback that is a little bit more specific so that I don't waste your time next time I come to you with, right? Because it could be that that person also doesn't realize that they just need to slow down and be a better manager. And maybe they would want to be if they realized that they weren't that good, right? It's possible also they don't care about being a good manager and that's just not in their DNA.
I don't think what you're just saying should be this junior person's responsibility to have that conversation. I feel like the reason why this person wrote to us is because they feel like they don't have
Can't
that.
do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So in which case, then it's a go to your HR and or whoever to see if it's a switch that you can do, or just see if you can sort of secretly keep leaning on the other person as a mentor as you need a sounding board. I don't know if there's another option.
The person who is not a happy mentor may be relieved to get off the hook on this. It sounds to me like they would.
Like they're not that into it.
No, and that's why they're
just not that into you.
No, exactly. And whatever. Maybe it would be anybody. They just don't want to have this additional duty. They're not a good teacher. Whatever it is, they may be totally happy to let you move on to somebody else. And it would be a great relief. I think that's what you have to rely on.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So thank you so much for tuning in for the PR One Down podcast.
And thank you to Peter for a really interesting interview.
Remember to submit your own agency stories and questions and to share our show with your friends and colleagues. If you subscribe and leave us a rating, it will also help us reach new listeners like you.
And if you have an anonymous PR horror story of your own, please send it our way at the contact email below the episode notes.
Can't wait to wind down with you again next time. I had a lot of fun seeing you in person in New York.
Oh, yeah, that was fun.
That was a blast. I was sad you didn't come on the Saturday thing, the Saturday adventure.
Oh, right, because I was. Did I go to New Jersey? I guess I was in New Jersey.
You said you did, but Allie didn't think you did.
Oh, no, I totally did.
She's like, I bet you Laura didn't go and she just didn't come to hang out.
That's not true.
Oh my God.
I definitely went to New Jersey.